Welcome, everyone. My name is Harish Doddi. I'm an EIR at Storm and have been a serial entrepreneur building AI companies. Prior to being an entrepreneur, I have been involved as an early employee in companies like Twitter, Snap, and Lyft, building products from scratch. Some of them are AI products. I've been really excited about this whole generative AI space, have been closely following it. And today we have a great panel of experts who would love to share their insights. They have been practical users of generative AI in their own organizations. And I would like to have them share their lessons, what they have learned in their journey. I think before that, let's have a quick introduction for each panelist. So Jason, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Harish. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Lobo. I have recently accepted a role at Merck Pharmaceuticals as a director, and I know it says Verici over there. That's my fourth startup. And at Merck, I'm primarily leading their AI-driven data analytics platform. And before joining Merck, I was at Johnson & Johnson, where I led an enterprise-wide AI ML platform, empowering AI at scale for a lot of pharma functions. My past experience includes working at large enterprises, consulting at one of the big fours, and launching multiple startups. I'm a father of two, husband to one. I love reading, so if you have any book recommendations, happy to hear that. And I love mountain biking. Over to you.
Great. Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Patrick Coughlin. I lead our global technical sales teams at Splunk, and I've got responsibility for go-to-market strategy, new product introduction, and a lot of conversation around introducing Gen AI and AI products in general at Splunk. Before Splunk, I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called TrueStar, which was a cloud-native threat intelligence platform. So in the cybersecurity space, my background is as a cybersecurity practitioner, and in fact, Storm Ventures and Arun was a lead investor in my previous company. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and hello, everyone. My name is Amin Ahmad, and in 2020, I co-founded a company called Vectara, which I'm currently the CTO. Vectara, I think you can think about it as a company that brings generative AI capabilities to app builders. If you're building an application in the enterprise or externally and you want to imbue it with language understanding capabilities, that's what we support you with. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in Google. Almost all that time was in Google research. In around 2017, I led a very small group, and we built what, to my knowledge, is the first demonstration of a pre-trained general purpose, what's known as a zero-shot dual encoder model for text retrieval, and then spent a few subsequent years integrating that into a lot of products within the company. So that's my background. Prior to that, I had a career for about 10 years as in software engineering. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if you guys observed this, but this whole panel is, at some point or the other in their lifetime, they're actually an entrepreneur. All right, let's get started with the first question. This is for Jason. So Jason, given that you have seen AI in the whole pharmaceutical industry, definitely something like a drug discovery process is quite resource intensive, even today. Help us understand how a technology like generative AI is really going to disrupt the way drug discovery process is going to change, and maybe like some other use cases that you think in your industry where a technology like generative AI will have a big impact.
Awesome. I think there are two questions in that. I'll try to break that up. The first one is for the non-pharma folks. What is drug discovery? Drug discovery is a process of identifying new drug molecules, which has a specific set of properties that can have a desired effect on a patient's body. So finding that new drug, that's the process called as drug discovery. Now, traditional medicinal chemistry is a hit and miss approach, high throughput screening, processing billions and billions of molecules, shipping thousands and thousands of compounds to the laboratories, testing those compounds on diseased tissue, and finding out the output of it. It is a costly process. It's time consuming. It has a low accuracy as well in finding out efficacy and toxicity. So where does AI come into the picture, generative AI? We use generative AI today to generate text, to generate SQL queries, generate Python code. The advanced teams at R&D are using generative AI to generate or propose new drug molecules. A drug molecule is represented as a simple smile string. It's just a string of letters, C, N, whatever it is, and those string of letters denotes the molecule. So what our scientists are doing is they have one method that they use is called a generator and a discriminator. They use a generator to create or propose or predict new drug molecules. And then the biochemist or the biologist or computational biologist, they call them, or even bioinformaticians, will look at the drug molecule and say, this is so hard to synthesize, I can't synthesize this. And they'll send it to a graveyard. And then you have a discriminator that is looking into the graveyard and learns from it and feeds that back into the generator. So you have these two systems that are collaborating together to find the best drug molecule. And with that best drug molecule, you're looking at high efficacy and low toxicity as well. So that's how generative AI today is used. So it's a 6-year-long process sometimes to find the lead drug candidate. We're using generative AI to bring that down to 3 months or less than a year.
Wow, 6 years to 3 months.
That's right.
That's very significant.
It is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
To answer the second part of your question, right, overall to pharma, and I was just explaining yesterday when the panelists we met for dinner last night, is a pharma company, you have to look at it as a bunch of companies together. You have an R&D division, you have commercial and sales, you have supply chain, you have manufacturing, and each of them need generative AI in a different way. So if you have domain expertise, all right, and I know Alif and Liat were talking about having that vertical experience. So if you have supply chain experience and you know how to ship products faster and how to get from a design to market the fastest way, guess what? In a pharma company, there is an opportunity for that. With R&D, there is tons of opportunity. With clinical trials, understanding the right patient group, having personalized medicine, there's opportunity over there. So I think we'll talk about opportunities later, but yes, there's a wide range of applications for generative AI in pharma.
So all in all, does this mean that we will be able to discover new drugs faster?
Yes, that is the goal. And you have to understand is that it still requires a human in the loop. A human in the loop is so important in this. There was a pharmaceutical company that was training AI to find the least toxic drug for a particular disease. And guess what? The AI became so smart at finding out the toxins. And they found about 40,000 toxins and termed that the library of death. So you have, and the only thing that stopped that machine from that library of death going out is a human in the loop. So yes, I think a human in the loop is extremely important. Back to your point, is that we are definitely reducing the process, but human intervention is constantly needed at every stage. It's not fully AI-driven.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Patrick, similar question for you. You have a lot of experience in the cybersecurity space. You have been looking at the whole hacking techniques, defenders, offenders, and whatnot. How do you see a technology like generative AI is really going to change this landscape?
Yeah. Well, I think we've been talking about this a lot. Actually, I was just at the Black Hat conference in Las Vegas, which is sort of the annual meetup of hackers and cybersecurity vendors that happens in like the hottest part of the summer in Vegas. But there was a lot of conversation about this. And I think a couple themes that came out, first, while this wave feels really new, it's been building for a very long time. And I'm sure many of you in the audience, and certainly my other panelists, can attest to the fact that this has been building over decades. And so what's really different about the now is I think ChatGPT kind of demonstrated the widespread appeal and the potential mass adoption of what this could look like at the enterprise. And it kind of brought that into focus. And so for the first time, we could really see a wave cresting over the enterprise and all the possible use cases that could be applied with things like
unlocking new use cases
Of course.
were not possible before.
And so at the same time, it is a wave, and we've seen massive technology waves before, whether that was, the .com and the internet, or the move to mobile, or cloud, or virtualization, or containers, or whatever it may be. And typically what happens inside of the enterprise in cybersecurity when these big technology waves come is it does a couple of things. One, it introduces new critical assets, right? New things that need to be protected, IP that we weren't really thinking about before. In this case, a year ago, enterprises weren't thinking about, and enterprise cybersecurity teams weren't thinking about protecting training data, right? And this all of a sudden becomes a massive key to unlocking your differentiator in AI. So introducing new critical assets. It also will introduce new infrastructure or new attack surface areas, what we call it in cybersecurity. So again, new things, new systems, new tooling that needs to be protected. And then it will introduce, on the third thing, it will introduce new ways to lose data. I was just talking to a founder who's leading a company in data security posture management. So there isn't a chief information security officer in the world right now that isn't thinking about what their company's policy should be as it relates to ChatGPT, right? Should they ban it? How do they allow their employees to interact with it? Because there's concern about a new way of leaking data or losing data out of the enterprise, right? And then the fourth thing is regulation. A new wave typically comes with anxiety around what kind of regulation is going to come. And for cybersecurity, that often means what kind of compliance regimes am I going to have to attest to in the future. So all of that isn't really different from previous waves we've seen in the past. Those are things that we know are coming, that we can be prepared for, and we have tools. What it also does is it often these new technology waves, they bring down the barrier to entry for new startups, new disruptors, right, who can then create technology and displace incumbents. But it also creates new accelerators and new leverage for, like, the evil twin of the Bay Area startup founder is kind of the entrepreneurial cyber hacker, the criminal gang, right? And it also gives them leverage and gives them new economies of scale. It helps them write better phishing emails or whatever it may be, right? So there's a lot of things that feel really...
When you say phishing email, it's like almost like a human voice.
Like a human wrote it, right?
Yeah.
They can increase their conversion rates on their phishing emails just like you can write better marketing or sales emails, right? So it's important that one, we recognize that this is an incredibly important wave, and there's some things that are different about this wave, but there are also things that we know are going to happen, and that we have tools in our toolbox as cybersecurity practitioners to prepare for these and to step towards these. So, yeah, been thinking a lot about that, and just remembering that always this is a kind of like a double-edged sword for security, right? The attackers will get advances, but in cybersecurity will probably be one of the biggest beneficiaries of artificial intelligence of all industries, because what do? Like you, we're trying to find needles in haystacks, right? We're trying to comb through tons of data to find the one little piece of signal, right, that tells us there's a degree of maliciousness, right? How powerful is AI in that? Similarly, we're trying to drive more automation into the enterprise because we don't have enough skilled people to step to all the problems in cybersecurity. Generative AI can be very critical in that. So just recognizing that as doomsday as some of this hype cycle can be as a practitioner, we've been here before in some ways, and that as much as we'll be competing with the bad guys and their benefits from AI, the cybersecurity industry and cybersecurity tooling is going to be a massive beneficiary as well.
So it's almost like enterprises need to be prepared for this because now people have access to new models, new generative AI models, like what you said. It's almost like a human writing voice, and they have to be prepared ahead of time to do this in enterprise security.
Absolutely.
It's really great. So I think, I mean, my next question is, like, obviously, there is all this generative AI models people are looking about. But there's always this debate when it comes to how do you train these generative AI models, right? Like you take a foundation model and you take the custom data set and try to retrain. That's like one way of doing things. Or the other way is all about this RAG techniques, where you don't like really retrain, but you do it in different way.
Right.
Help us understand from your experience. Obviously, I don't think there is like no right, this is right or that is right type of thing. It's still early, but help us understand the pros and cons.
Right. So I think the context for this question is actually, people look at ChatGPT or, generative AI, and what they want is they want something like that on their data.
Yeah.
Because ChatGPT or GPT-4 works great, but it's trained on the internet up to 2021, right? And the key to applying generative AI in the enterprise is actually to have those capabilities on the enterprise's data.
Yeah.
So the question is, I understand that there's many things are early in generative AI. Everything is early. Everything is being worked on. And there's a question of how do you most efficiently bring the organizational data to bear on the output of the LLM. And there's at least two main approaches that you highlighted. One approach is that I'm going to try and take the LLM and I'm going to fine tune it on the data in the organization. And there are some startup companies that are focused in that direction, and that there's a number of drawbacks there. But let me just tell you, the competing approach that you mentioned, retrieval augmented generation (RAG), instead proposes like this factored architecture, where you have some sort of retrieval system that first takes what the user is asking for and retrieves what's relevant from the company knowledge base and does it in a fairly high-speed way, and then feeds the large language model with whatever's relevant. And the large language model then is not internally storing all the organizational knowledge, but it's taking that information and then trying to formulate a coherent response. That's retrieval augmented generation. So I think retrieval augmented generation, this is the approach we've taken at Vectara. I think it has the benefit of scaling very well. As new information is added to the knowledge base, it becomes available instantly, for example, for the large language model to process. It's also easier to do certain things like to enforce access controls, because you can enforce access controls at the retrieval step. So if you don't have permission to see some data I have permission to see, we can ask the same question and get different answers back. The alternative approach actually so it suffers from a number of problems that I've alluded to here. First of all, the process of training a large language model by itself, there's many different approaches to doing it. You have full model fine-tuning, which is extremely expensive computationally to do, but that's the best understood approach. But then you have a fine-tuned model. You have to, let's say if you're taking a Llama 13B, for instance, right, 13 billion parameters. Well, you're going to have another model that's 13 billion parameters that's fine-tuned, and you want a fine-tuned model for your use case. It's another 13 billion parameter model. It becomes very unwieldy to deploy and manage these deployments. Or you can go with some of the newer
tech. Duplicating the whole work.
It's duplicating the entire model. There's other approaches, like from Microsoft Research recently, a technique called LoRa, where you're basically learning a small set of parameters that essentially act as a patch on the large model. So, for instance, the 13 billion parameters in a Llama 13B, the LoRa patch for that would essentially be 1 or 200 megabytes. So you have several orders of magnitude reduction, but then there's it's still actively developing research in terms of how do you apply that, and where the serving infrastructure for applying LoRa to a model in production at serving time. It's all being developed right now. So I think that was your question, that there's these two approaches. At Vectara, we see that the retrieval augmented generation is probably more flexible. Because of the commoditization of hardware, it is conceivable that this approach of actually training the LLM on the organizational data directly will become feasible at some point in the future. It could be 3 or 4 years in the future, I don't know. But today, I think it's really retrieval augmented generation is the right strategy for applying generative AI in most enterprise use cases.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think on that, a little bit like slight extension to that, talk to us a little bit about prompt engineering as well. How should enterprises really think about it?
About prompt engineering?
Right. Like in terms of like fine tuning LLMs and whatnot, you're talking about one, like obviously like training is super expensive.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
obviously you also need to put some sort of guardrails as well, like what you mentioned, like when the response is coming. How do you see enterprises need to think about this problem?
So there's many aspects to prompt engineering, and I'm not familiar with all of them. So I'll speak about what I'm familiar with. It's actually interesting. This term prompt engineering itself, it's part of the evolution of neural networks, and as they've grown larger, the approaches for tailoring their behavior have changed. So pre-2018, before BERT, the approach was that you could really only solve problems with a lot of data using neural networks. You would take all that data and you train a neural network from scratch. Okay, so that was how you would build. You would do machine learning with deep neural networks. What BERT brought about was the idea of pre-training. It popularized that idea, and now all of a sudden you have this gigantic, 23-layer deep transformer model that's not particularly good at any one task, but it has a massive knowledge of the world and how language works. And with a small amount of fine-tuning data, now we're talking on the order of a few thousand examples, you can get it to perform at human level in a wide range of tasks. So that was the era then of fine-tuning.
Yeah.
And then as the neural networks were scaled up even larger into the billions of parameters, you got to the point where you could do prompt-based tuning. So now the parameters of the model remain frozen, and simply by prefixing my input with an instruction, I can alter the behavior of the large language model. So I guess that's my my comment on that topic. There's several other angles, but that's what I'll say about it.
Thank you so much. So I think back to Jason, when you are doing this whole generative AI adoption in your organization, any lessons or insights that you saw that could be helpful to our audience to share? And also, I also wanted to add another question to that is, are there some unsolved challenges or which could be opportunities for startups actually? We do have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience as well.
Sure. So the first part of the question is, as we bring generative AI to an organization, we've seen governance as a really big challenge, something that DV from Alteryx was also talking about as governance. And with experience before generative AI, just AI simply, we saw, as an enterprise, we behaved like a tool junkie, right? You'd like a tool, you go and get it. And then finally, you're sitting on like a bunch of tools, and you don't even know whether it's benefiting the organization anymore, but we know we have a big payout at the end of the year every time to renew licenses. So we saw that when cloud also came in, we gave access, VPC access to all business teams and business IT teams. And at the end of the year, it was like, who's going to pay for that cost? Is it business? Is it IT? Things like that. So governance has become so important from a cost management, FinOps point of view. We want to enable the organization. We want to provide the organization with a sandbox environment to run your machine loads, but at the same time, what is a fail-safe mechanism, or what is the appetite? I think that's my favorite word that I've also used, is what's your appetite? How long do you want to run this experiment? When do you call this experiment has succeeded? When you want to get out of sandbox into production? So those are some of the learnings that we've had with machine learning in general, which we are also bringing into the generative AI adoption. That's the first part. And the second part, you asked about, some ideas, I guess, from a pharma side. There are a couple of things. One is the RAG approach. That's really something that we're looking at it very, very intensely because, again, back to the cost. We paid like, 10 million just on VPCX cost and not sure there was really an output for that. GPUs were given. We got GPU farms as well because everybody wants to train models, and the cost was just prohibitive. So RAG is something that we're absolutely talking about. So that's a big opportunity area. The other one, just pharma specific, is the audience aware of the Human Genome Project, right? Have you heard of the Human Proteome Project? It's called the HPP. So on this planet, there are about 10 million found cataloged proteins. And that's all that's there on this planet, 10 million proteins. And what is a protein? We are all made up of proteins, a combination of protein and bones, really. Any function, any movement you make, it's all protein, actually speaking. So what is 10 raised to the power of 14? 10 raised to the power of 14 is quadrillion. That's say 1,000 trillion. The number of possible protein combinations is 20 raised, that because we have 20 amino acids, is 20 raised to the power of 50,000. So there are so many different type of protein structures possible. It does not even exist on this planet, but there is a protein out there that can solve a particular disease area. There's a protein that can solve for your genetic makeup and the way your body responds to a particular drug and give you really good therapy. So AlphaFold, which is a Google initiative, they have actually mapped about 200 million proteins. So that's a big initiative that's happening in pharma, is how do we understand molecular structure? How do we understand the 3D shape of protein folding structure? That's a protein folding problem. That's one of the grand problems. That's a huge opportunity area. A lot of startups are in that area. Yeah, I think that's really, some of the top problems that
That's really great. Thank you. So I think, Patrick, similar question to you. What are some of the learnings that you have seen in the early days of the generative AI adoption? And also, as an extension to that, what are some of the untapped opportunities? That could be like new opportunities for startups.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think I'm probably one of the only people that'll be on one of these stages with sales in their title, right? We got a lot of really smart people who are technologists and who are product people. I happen to think that the companies that are going to win in the enterprise are going to be the ones who are enterprise grade. And it may be less about who's got the most well-attributed model, who's got the deepest training data set, and it may be the ones who and there was some conversation on the previous panel about this, but who can really position their product and their company best for the enterprise. And when we talk about enterprise grade, which is interesting, like in the SaaS revolution of like the last decade, it was only in the last couple of years that we started talking about like enterprise grade SaaS. And I'm wondering if we can kind of pull that forward in this AI wave to start thinking earlier about what does it really mean to be enterprise grade AI sooner. Because I think that can be as much of a differentiator as having a better model, right? And what does that mean? So enterprise grade is often about reliability and resilience, and it's often about little things or seemingly little things like what's the integration layer look like? How quickly can you deploy this inside of an enterprise that has a never-ending amount of legacy systems, right, that they're running on? It often comes down to monitoring and compliance and comfort with governance, right? And so as you think about the companies that you're building and the problems that you're trying to solve, as important as it is to spend $1 on R&D and to have the best performing products, you need to be thinking about, how important it is to actually have the resilience and the reliability that you're going to need to sell into the enterprise. And the last thing I would just say there is, and there was again some discussion on the previous panel, I think I learned probably the hard way at TrueStar, and probably a lot of folks in this town in particular, it's easy to believe that the best product is going to win. You want to believe that the best product is going to win in the enterprise. But this town is littered with the corpses of companies who probably had the better bread box. And they were beat by companies that had better product marketing more so than just product. And so thinking about the other P's, as we would say, not just product, but how are you thinking about positioning and packaging and promotion or sales? What are the pricing models? What's the go-to-market fit need to look like for the solutions that you're developing? Thinking about that sooner, thinking about the requirements to really deploy this at scale in the enterprise, I think can be an incredible differentiator for this batch of AI companies that's coming out. So I would really encourage folks to not wait a decade to start thinking about what enterprise grade really means, not waiting a decade to think about what product marketing in AI actually is, and spend as much of a dollar on those other P's or as much of an hour on those other P's as you are on product. And I think you'll find that your success in the enterprise can be that much faster.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, same question, you have been interacting with enterprises,
Right.
you work with executives and whatnot. You have seen the whole infrastructure environments,
Yes.
internally. What are your lessons or learnings that you would like to share that would be beneficial for the audience, and also any unsolved challenges as well?
Well, I think what we heard, that's actually just a key point, is you need to focus on taking care of security issues related to, these models and scalability, uptime, things like that. If you can solve those, the issue is, like I said, there's a lot of question marks around generative AI. And one of them is, are LLMs commoditizing or not? You've seen the big companies, they're trying to lock down their research a little bit more. They want to try and get more differentiated. And then on the other extreme, you have companies like Facebook, which are putting out models like Llama 2, which, just this morning I was, in a presentation, and it looks like it's outperforming GPT 3.5, and it's close to GPT 4 in a range of tasks. These are models, we're talking tens of millions of dollars to train. You're not going to necessarily be able to differentiate there easily. So it is, the other aspects of enterprise readiness worth investing in. The other thing I'll say, just coming from a more technical perspective, if you look at generative AI, it does introduce a lot of new infrastructure into the organizations that are integrating it. So, for instance, you have this concept of a vector database, which is a new piece of infrastructure that basically does vector similarity at very high speed, and it does it in an approximate manner. The concept of vector database and vector similarity has been around before, but what really catalyzed its growth was transformer-based deep neural networks that could produce vector representations of complex objects, be it a document or a picture, and then arrange those in the vector space in such a way that, nearness in the vector space somehow corresponded to semantic similarity of those objects. So that drives, for instance, a lot of retrieval augmented generations. You have companies like Pinecone that provide, vector databases. Then you also have the fact that, what I alluded to in my earlier statement is the models have grown steadily larger. Their capabilities have increased, but they become more unwieldy to deploy. The infrastructure for serving those models, if an organization really wants to run them internally, which is a question whether they should be trying to do that or not, that's becoming more complex, and you have companies like Anyscale and Rayserve that they're in there trying to solve some of those problems. It's interesting because counteracting that is the fact that 4 or 5 years ago you had Google with their TPUs being way ahead of everyone else, but NVIDIA has come in with their, let's say, A100s and H100s, and they're really kind of commoditizing the hardware to serve very large models.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. There's a lot of question marks. I know I'm not giving you answers on all
Changing
this.
so fast.
It's changing so fast. But in the case of, if you just take a look at retrieval augmented generation, which has come up several times, there's enough of these moving pieces. There's the vector database, there's the encoding neural networks that need to produce the vector representations. Those need to scale separately from the large language model, which is producing some sort of generative output, often a summary or something, on top of the results of the retrieval step. They have this interplay of all these components. And so at least the way that we see it in Vectara is ultimately it would be nice for most organizations around the world can benefit from these advances in language understanding in AI that have come out since 2017. But most of them are not going to want to deploy this infrastructure. Even if you give it to them as an open source project, like, let's say Haystack, Weaviate or something like that, they're not going to have the ops teams to run this in production. So perhaps the right approach is a cloud-based serverless solution, and that's what we're trying to provide for our customers.
Managed.
Completely managed, auto scale, and crucially taking care of some of those things like the security issues that come up. Again, maybe a lot of startups aren't thinking about that. They want to differentiate on the model quality alone, and I don't think that's the right path.
Yeah. No, definitely. I do agree with what you said, that there is one ecosystem of companies like OpenAI, which are taking a closed approach. And there is the other ecosystem of companies like through Hugging Face, through Facebook Llama, they're taking a more open approach. The OpenAI is taking a closed approach, and these guys are taking an open approach. It's interesting what we have to see in the next few years.
Absolutely.
Which one will be winning in the enterprise, because it's too early to say at this point still.
Definitely.
I think we have only few minutes left. One question I would like to ask is, you guys have been entrepreneurs at some point of time in your careers. Probably because there are so many AI companies that are coming, right, with this new wave of the whole generative AI. Tell us some amazing piece of advice that you would like to give to founders who are starting AI companies. Yeah, please.
Okay. I think I would like to say being an entrepreneur and intrapreneur as well on both the sides. There's one word, but I'll emphasize it 3 times, and not the verb form of it, and that's market, market, market. So the first market stands for collaboration with the market. It's not about just selling your product to the enterprise. Sometimes an enterprise just needs help in framing the problem. They just don't understand how to frame the problem. They know they need AI, but don't understand how to really frame it. One example of collaboration, since I was talking about collaboration, is a startup called as Coughlin, which does federated learning. Coughlin plus AWS plus MIT brought together about 10 pharma companies, built a consortium of Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, GSK, Novartis, and a bunch of others. And what they did was, you have to understand, is that the drug formula is even more heavily guarded than Coke's trademark secret, right? But you have all of these drug companies coming together, pouring in their drug formula, but in a privacy-preserving way, or rather in an intellectual property-preserving way. We're able to share those chemical properties with everybody. So for the benefit of humanity, how to use federated learning so that everybody has access to everybody's database, but does not have that proprietary access, right? So that collaboration is really important with the market. The second market is, I think one thing that as entrepreneurs is market research. Market research is a science. And I really feel that, as an entrepreneur, we need to have a crazy idea. You have to be crazy, right, to get into a startup, to launch a startup. And I think it needs a crazy idea to get started. But when you convert from a 0 to 1, when you want to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it has to be data-driven. What is your SWOT analysis or your SOAR analysis? What is your market segment? What's your TAM, your SAM, your SOM? What is your competitive analysis? What is your blue ocean strategy versus red ocean strategy? So these are all part of market research, and that is extremely critical. That you probably heard product market fit, and that part of that market research. That's the second market. And the third market is that you're going to have a lot of distractions in the market. Right? I don't know if you know about this Greek mythology story about Atlanta and Hippopotamus. They were racing with each other, and Hippopotamus, when they were racing, knew he wouldn't be able to win the race, so threw golden apples in the middle of the race and distracted Atlanta, right? And every opportunity in the market is going to look like a distraction to you, like, oh, this looks exciting, I'm going to run behind that. But I would say you need to have like a servo mechanism, like a guided missile. You know what your target is, and even if you get off, you have to come back on. So that's, I would say, market, market, market.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of made the point in my last comment, but I think I would just go one step further and say, think about the persona. As much as you're thinking about the market, think about who your customer is. And, I've seen a lot of demos from AI companies. And I think what's a little bit interesting about this AI wave is, we talk a lot in go to market about the wow moment. How do you kind of demonstrate that wow moment for your customer? And then how do you convert that hopefully into revenue at some point? I think what I've seen with a lot of these companies, I'm actually having wow moments all the time, because I'm amazed at the technology, but I don't know what the wow is for me in my job, right? And so the danger here is that we'll create a lot of technology, we'll create a lot of products, we'll create a lot of companies that can create a lot of wows, but we won't be clear about who the wow is for.
It's all about like a cool technology.
Yeah,
It's solving.
and my mind is blown constantly, looking at products in this space and even looking at Splunk's products. But the challenge is really going to be the who. And if we invest as much time putting as many parameters on our ideal customer profiles as we have on our models, think about really how you attribute your ideal customer profile really sharply in a nuanced way in the early stage. And then you can always grow that and expand that ideal customer profile as you look to expand your market. But go into your demos, go into your conversations with your investors with a really strong opinion about who the customer is who's going to benefit from this wow. And I think we'll see a lot more traction.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess I'm doing this for the first time. We're 3 years into it. I don't have a lot of lessons that I think I'd like to share with the audience because I'm not far enough into it myself. But what I would say is, this was actually a tricky point for a lot of VCs last year. It became very hard for them to tell, to differentiate what was the company doing versus what was an LLM doing in the background that the company didn't have any role in developing. And I think as a founder, you should also ask yourself that question if you're getting into this space, is that, what's the defensibility of this idea? Is it deep enough? Is it going to be hard to replicate, or is it going to be easy to replicate? So that's one little bit of advice I would give. I think one thing I would say from my own personal journey is I've found the whole thing to be much easier with a co-founder. So I think that's something that if you're thinking about getting into this, you may want to think about that and look around for a good one. It really helps.
Yeah, I think getting to the point about defensibility, I think you're spot on that, given that obviously with the whole ChatGPT thing,
right,
there are a lot of companies became obsolete. In that journey.
Yes.
Because it could be a simple plugin in ChatGPT. You don't need to have a big product or a big company and whatnot.
Exactly.
I think in terms of defensibility, whether it be a proprietary data set that you have access to, or it could be a proprietary LLM that you have access to, there could be different forms of defensibility. But I do completely agree with you that startups have to think about defensibility when they are operating in the generative AI space, and how do they sustain?
And actually, now that you said that, it's the LLMs and the algorithms for training them, it's actually not very complex to grasp what's going on. You're learning compression fundamentally. That's what an LLM is doing. So you made a key point, is that the defensibility often lies in access to the data. Mm-hmm. If you have access to data sets that are not publicly available, you can train your models on that, and you're going to get something that no one else can compete with. So the data is really the key now. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. Learned a lot of new things. So thank you. Thank you so much for the panelists.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.